Hello, everybody. So today we're going to cover something that I find particularly interesting, even though that it's exceedingly uncommon in the type of repertoire that we've at least been looking at so far in this sequence. Looking at non-dominant sevenths. There's a couple reasons why they don't appear. Sonority gets kind of complicated, and again, some of this is genre specific, but in any case, basically we're looking at the chords that aren't 2 and 5 and 7. Okay, so we've seen those already. But other diatonic sevenths are possible. 1, 3, 6, and 4 can all also have their own sevenths. These are possible but rarer, especially in a more strict harmonic context, as many of them are a product of voice leading. So for instance, sequences. You can alternate chords with sevenths in a sequence, and in that case, it sounds functionally fine. Genre is definitely a factor. So in common practice music, we don't like sevenths as their own typically resolved. If we see something like this, we assume it's going to go to there rather than just sit here as the end of the piece. However, in other classical music, and by I say more recent, meaning even the late Romantic and Debussy, for instance, is more recent, or just other genres, other sevenths stand as their own musical objects. So getting away with having like a 1 major 7 going to a 3-7, for instance, is fine. In classical music, you don't see it as much, but this week is just kind of like a detour way. Non-dominant sevenths will not become a big part of the rest of the sequence because they don't really happen, especially in chorale textures, as much. Although today we're going to have a lot of examples of that, just kind of as like an exercise as to like what is possible beyond just 2, 5, and 7. We also get a new chord quality because of this that we haven't seen before. We've seen dominant seventh, which is we say dominant seventh. Dominant means both the function, but also like the quality. When you have a major triad and a minor seventh, we call that like a dominant chord. So that's what we've seen already. We've also seen half diminished and fully diminished. So diminished with the minor seventh and diminished with a diminished seventh. And we've also seen a minor seventh. So a 2-7, for instance, is like that. However, this chord quality is a major chord with a major seventh on it. The major seventh, so to speak. So we'll go ahead and talk about this. Now, here is a chart of all... Hopefully I didn't cut off at the top right there. All possibilities of adding sevenths to all of our chords. So some of these we've seen before. And then in minor, I've distinguished between the minor and major 5 and major and diminished 7. We'll get to that in a second. So for instance, we've got, right? In major, 1 major 7 is possible to happen. It is less likely, but you get this kind of wonderful kind of contemporary sound. And if you think of like, if anybody, piano players like the Satie, Nassiens and stuff like that, that's a major 7 there. It's got a 9 too, but that kind of sound does happen eventually. It's less common in, say, the classical period with the big C classical period, but in any case, of course, any of these inversions too, like for instance doing a 1 major 4-2, you get this kind of grit to it. So on. We've seen 2's old. When we add a 7th to 3, we get another minor 7th chord. Right? Now we have Mi, Sol, Ti, and Re. For these, what I would say for like hearing the difference for these is use what voices that you have and really listen to your bass. Because, especially in a 4-part texture, every single pitch is going to be different. So it's relatively easy to identify if the chord is a 7th or not, because you will hear 4 unique pitches instead of 3 pitches. But from there, then, you really want to try to hear as many of those voices as you can to try to really narrow it down. So, 3. 4 is another major 7 chord. Right? But 4 is such a different chord quality to 1. It's not a different, not a chord quality. It has a different function than 1, so I don't think that 1 major 7 and 4 are going to be that easy to confuse. We've seen 5. 6 is also a minor 7. I would imagine that 3 and 6 are going to be the ones that get confused because they don't function like 2 does, where 2 is, right? That's how 2 functions, but 3 doesn't function like that. You will never see a 3 to a 5 or a 6 to a 5. And typically a deceptive cadence won't have, you won't go to a 6-7. So in 3-7 and 6-7, these are usually predominant contexts. So yeah, there's not, again, these do not happen that often. So this is just kind of an exploration of possibilities out there. We will see some examples of these in action. But yeah, when we get to these sevenths, it's just about like, you got to hear as many voices as possible. I know that we typically grade the soprano and the bass and then the cymbal, but if you hear a chord that you can't really identify, do your best to listen to those inner voices, because if you can get all 4 inner voices, you really narrow it down to just a single option. So even if you can get 3 voices, that really narrows it down. And then we've seen 7 half diminished, so that's old news. Now, for minor is a bit different in what chords we see when. 1-7 almost never happens. You have a minor 7 chord. 1-7, again, it almost never happens because it doesn't sound tonic enough. A 1 major 7 does, right? But a 1 minor 7 doesn't sound tonic enough to usually be a point of resolution. And you may be asking, well, what about if we made it a 1 minor major 7? That also almost doesn't happen, almost never happens. That chord is really interesting in certain genres, but in classical music that doesn't happen because we get an augmented triad between our 3rd, our 5th, and our 7th if we do that, which is why they're typically avoided. They usually then resolve upwards, okay? So yeah, 1-7 almost never appears. 2 half diminished we've seen, old news. 3 becomes your major 7 chord. Which again, 3 and 6 will function the same way as they do in major in terms of how they progress. So usually as a predominant chord for both 3 and for 6 with the major 7. Whoops, pardon me. My jazz slipped in there for a second. But in any case, yeah. 3 and 6, the 7ths are only decorative and they will only happen predominantly. 4 becomes a minor 7. You do tend to see this less often than just a regular 4. I'm not going to say that it never happens, but, compared to a 4 major 7 in a major key, a 4 minor 7 in a minor key is, I would say, less common than, than just a regular 4. 5 minor 7 also doesn't happen that often because it only happens as a predominant chord if 5 is part of a sequence where it's not being modified to a dominant chord, right? So basically, if it basically looks like a 5 in every capacity but doesn't sound like a 5, it might be acting as some sort of like predominant in a sequence. 5-7 we've seen, 6 major 7 we just talked about, 7-7, which is a 7. This is actually a dominant sounding chord. So we've got, you will not see this that often because it's going to sound like it wants to resolve to somewhere else, but it doesn't. 7 will not resolve down to where it's supposed to. I guess it could go down to 3, which kind of sounds like that, but in any case, this gets into the weeds a bit. You will more likely, if you ever see a major 7, you will see the triad version, or if you see the 7-7, it will almost always be followed by a 3. Right? That kind of thing. Just really think about like what's possible for, like, not what's possible, but what's likely for our root progressions, because that's really going to impact when we're going to see certain chords. And then if you hear 7s, then you can kind of really strip them away and think about how the chords are functioning. And then we've seen 7 diminished already. So 7 diminished is alt hat. So let's take a look at some examples in context of this. Here's a sequence. Okay, here's an example of how you can get 7ths as generated in a sequence. So we've got a descending 5ths here. Right? Regular bass motion. We've got an alternating kind of intervallic pattern here. Let's see, what would this be? Yeah, 5-10. It's written right there. I don't know why I had to ask. And then also we've got sevenths on every other chord. So for instance, it would be something like this. See? And then we go down. See? So there we've got a minor seventh, and then we go back up. We've seen this one before. This is just a 2/7, and then here we're gonna upset the sequence a little bit to cadence. This is the kind of thing that you could see in Bach, for instance. This is the most likely case to see any sort of major seventh, or to see like a 3/7 in a classical or a Baroque or a early Romantic. This is how you would see those in these contexts, is in progressions such as this, if not explicitly sequences like this one, then something of the like. Here's some other progressions. These are a bit more modern sounding, but they do have these examples. So notice that, let's look at this first one in a minor key here. Okay, let's see here. We got G doubled there. Okay, so in this case, this really shows you how close in identity 1 and 3 is, because what happens is we're going to change one note, or pardon me, we're going to change two notes. Okay, right? We get our 3/7 there. Okay, and then we'll go to our 4 chord. Just a triad. 2/7, a 2 half dimension we've seen before. And then we just have a cadential 6/4. So really the only odd chord is that 3 major 7 there. Okay, where we've got right? But if you notice, look at the voice leading, for instance. Okay, look at the voice leading. We've got G in the tenor, going down to F, to then go to the 3rd of the 4 chord, right? In the right hand, we've got kind of static motion, oblique motion here. In the soprano. And then in the alto, we've got motion, kind of neighbor motion up and back. So you can really see how the 3 is really, and again, this almost doesn't function as a 3 so much as it is just kind of tonic expansion getting us 2/4. I could easily just play this. Right? But this just gets a little bit of an interesting kind of stop along the way. Right? You know, exactly. And this is a situation, this is why we don't really see like in a chorale context, where we don't really see 7th chords that much, because in principle and context in repertoire, we see them as products of voice leading typically. So you almost would be reticent to even call that 2nd chord a chord. You could just call it tonic expansion, so to speak. But in any case, I digress. Let's look at the second example here. Okay, so we're in B major. Okay, there's your 7th for you. Okay, notice here we've got a 6/7, we've got a 4/7, okay, and then we just have a 2 cadential 6/4 to 1. So the 4/6/5, and this is why I personally prefer, even though it's not necessarily necessary, I like to put either MAJ for major or put a triangle or a delta to signify that a chord is having, it has a major 7th instead of a minor 7th. But in any case, because the difference between a 6/7 and a 4/6/5 is a huge difference in quality that just changing the Roman numeral doesn't really accomplish. But in any case, so here's our progression. Notice that between 1 and 6/7, we have no change in anything but bass. Right? Again, why 7ths are so interesting, because they allow you to have more common tones, so to speak, between chords. Smoother voice leading. And then only one note changes here to make it a 4. It's quite nice, quite a nice sound. And then we go to our 2 chord. And then from here, this is the sound that we know. Okay, so yeah, this one, again, these first 3 chords are all just products of voice leading. They're all just kind of getting you from 1 to 2. Because we could call the 4 as kind of being assumed to the 2, or kind of there's a couple different ways to conceive of this, but in any case, you know, hardly a change, hardly a change. The biggest change from the first chord to another chord is from 1 to the 2 the 2 minor, right? So we could just do this. That's the progression. We just added these 2 chords in the middle here to make things a little bit more interesting. I'll leave it at that. Keep you in suspense. So, great. As an exercise, just for the sake of, you know, just kind of for fun, what would it be like to dictate something with 7ths like this? Let's go ahead and do a dictation. Just one. Again, we will not have these non-major 7ths have such a prominent role on your on work going forward on your final this quarter. This is a little bit of a detour way, but it does answer some lingering questions some of you may have about, well, what about the other chords with 7ths? Okay, so A flat major, okay. We have a first inversion chord to begin with. Okay. Why did I say 7 measures? It's 7 chords, everybody. 7 chords. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, 7 chords. I'm going to give you 6 listens for this one. We're going to do quick between the listens, because if you need to, you can pause. I don't want to belabor this too much. Okay, so here we go. 6 listens. 1, 2, 3, 4. Take about 15-20 seconds. Okay, for this next listen, I'm going to do just the outer voices. This is how we're going to proceed for this one, because this one is just kind of an experiment. So that was one listen with blocks, blocked chords all the way through. Listen 2. I'm going to go ahead and give you outer voices. I'm going to give you just bass and soprano. Listen 3 and 4, I'm going to roll every chord. Listen 5 and 6, I'm going to block every chord again. Okay, so here we go. So here's what the chord would be. I'm going to play just the outer voices this time. Okay, ready? 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, take another 15 seconds or so. Okay, so listen 3 of 6. I'm going to roll 3 and 4. Okay? 1, 2, 3, 4. Sorry, I made a mistake. Beg your pardon. Beg your pardon. I forgot the note that makes this interesting. Here we go. Mulligan. Sorry, everybody. Here's your 1, 2, 3, 4. So that was listen 3. Take about 15 to 20 seconds, then I'll roll listen 4. Okay, here we go. I'm gonna roll listen 4. 1, 2, ready, go. Take another 15 seconds. Okay, last 2 times I'm going to go ahead and play them as chords. Okay, here we go. 1, 2, ready, go. Take about 20 seconds, and then we'll do our 6th and final listen. Okay, here we go. 6th and final listen. 1, 2, ready, go. Okay, let's go ahead and talk about this one. I particularly like this dictation a lot. I think it sounds quite nice, and I really love the expressive possibilities of sevenths. Yeah, it not only makes it sound modern, but it makes it sound modern yet still very much of our kind of our common practice idiom. Okay, so this one's got kind of a lot going on. We start off on a 1-6, we go to a 5-4-3, we go to a 1 in root position, right? We have a kind of mi re do, right? Right? What makes it complicated is that when we arrive at our tonic chord in the 3rd chord, we've got a major 7th there. Right? It's a common tone held over from our alto. We have a pretty big leap from the 1st chord to the 2nd chord, but then the rest of the piece kind of unfolds downwards. So we've got this kind of, right, just kind of descent down, so to speak. Now the 3rd chord or pardon me, the 3 chord, right? The 3 chord is achieved by keeping 2 notes common and then collapsing inwards. We could have kept this just a regular 3 like this, right? But we made it a 3 minor 7 because then that gives us really nice smooth voice leading to our 4 chord. Although this one itself also has a major 7. In this case, we probably could have avoided that by just going to D flat, because that would smooth things out and even give us a common tone from when we go to our 5-7. But in any case, this kind of makes it more expressive and interesting. And then, and so on. Yeah, I don't want to go too much into detail on this because, like I said, this is kind of more of an exploratory kind of concept for us. But really interesting what musical possibilities you can kind of get just by adding these sevenths and kind of playing around with them in a kind of smooth chorale texture, so to speak. So, great. Well, that's it for today. Let's go ahead and talk about what we're doing next time. Next week, believe it or not, we are coming up on week 9, which for us is basically the last week of the quarter, because week 10 is basically all final stuff. So, complete diatonicism in longer progressions. We are here, everybody. Any diatonic chord in major or minor, in any inversion, with or without a 7th, in SATB or piano voicings. And also these will be longer progressions, 7 to 10 chords and beyond. We'll be finishing up chapter 14 in Melody Land. We'll be applying all of our rhythms from Monday and Wednesday of this week to melodies. And chapter 15 is when we get into non-chord tones. So that'll be what we're getting to in the fall. We get into non-chord tones, secondary dominance, modulations. So basically we're at the complete brink of what you can do with white keys, and we're moving on to more interesting kind of musical journeys, so to speak. Homework is posted to the Goucher Space right now. It is due Monday, May 25th at 8 a.m. to my email. So it's posted right now. Yeah, if you have any questions, as always, don't hesitate to reach out. I'm happy to help in any way that I can. And yeah, we're in the home stretch, everybody. So that's it for today. I will see all of you next time.